Ace Attorney.
Objection!
To be honest, like I said in my previous video on Spore, it's also one of my biggest guilty pleasures. But to be honest, I never quite dived in and decided to analyze each game. So I decided, hey, let's change that. This video is an analysis of the entire mainline Ace Attorney series, not counting the investigations games, not counting DGS. It's a full deep dive into the series, what it represents, what it says, and also, crucially, what it could have been so much more. I think it's only appropriate to start from the beginning, so let's do that. So you'll know the jazz with the originals by now. Ace Attorney starts simple enough, it's a tale as old as time, a parody of the Japanese legal system and its 90% conviction rate. I do believe that is a tale. A fairy tale, if you will. The idea that Ace Attorney is a parody. Parodies make less of something. They poke fun, they belittle. If Ace Attorney is a parody, then it's one of the worst works of parody I've ever seen. From the first turnabout, the game has very clearly shown you its cards. It is not a parody. It's a power fantasy. A liberal power fantasy. The 90% conviction rate isn't subject of the parody. It's the villain. The game isn't making fun of an oppressive system. It's fantasizing about a single heroic lawyer beating it. That's not parody. That's power fantasy. The game doesn't deconstruct the system. It imagines conquering it on its own terms. Its core ideals are very clear. The game doesn't believe in systemic injustices. Instead, it believes in bad individuals that corrupt justice, but ultimately, systems aren't corrupt, only individuals are. The entire game, in fact, is framed through this simplistic lens. Red White is a mustache-twirling villain. The game never seems to ask if maybe the system itself that let him do his horrible deeds, the blackmailing of judges, framing initially Maya and then Phoenix for the murder, amounts to anything. Rather, the game offers a simplistic answer. The problem is not systemic, it's individual. Red White is the problem. Edgeworth is also an example of this. He starts as a corrupt prosecutor that forges evidence, yet the game never asks itself about its real-life implications, that maybe the court justice system doesn't exist to find the truth. Instead, he goes on a journey, which ultimately leads to Turnabout Goodbyes, where he learns finally that Von Karma's creed was wrong, and that the true duty of a prosecutor is to find the truth no matter where it leads. The reason for all of this is that Ace Attorney really isn't a courtroom drama. It's not really interested with dealing with the actual real-life implications it poses at times. It's rather a character melodrama, a soap opera. This is Ace Attorney's biggest strength, and also its biggest flaw. Ace Attorney, like all art, is political. It reflects a view of the world. In a world where evildoers crumble at their feet by pointing at them and screaming objection, and where the problem is always bad individuals instead of systems, is a deeply political one. We'll see, as this video goes on, that this series does try to grapple with complex political concepts at times, some games with more success than others. The original Ace Attorney laid the groundwork that all other games would build from, and because of that, it's guilty of all the other games' flaws to some extent. But I can't lie when I say that I rather quite enjoy it. The original game, so far, is small scale, believable. It doesn't go to absurd lengths that we'll see later in the series, and it isn't scared of developing its characters as well, even if I think that the way that it does reflects a deeply naive version of the world. Edgeworth has an excellent character arc, but what he learns, that a prosecutor must find the truth no matter where it leads, is ultimately misguided in my opinion. It's a romanticization of prosecution as a profession, but I still rather quite appreciate Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney for laying the groundwork and keeping everything believable. After every game in this video, I'll be adding the game onto a tier list. Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney goes in A tier. No game in the series reaches S tier for me, unfortunately. If I had to give it a score, it's a solid 8 out of 10. Really good game, even if misguided. This game would lay the groundwork for all that was to come, which leads us right into Justice for All is a complicated game. It's often viewed as the black sheep of the original trilogy, and I found myself disagreeing with that notion for a while. However, it was the thought of making this video and thinking about Justice for All that made me realize that it's actually much worse than a simple black sheep. While Justice for All establishes things in the series that are important for later, like the Fae Clan, Morgan Fae, Pearly, etc., people often cite its last case as its only redeeming factor. It was actually thinking about making this video that made me realize that Farewell My Turnabout is not a good finale case. Some of you may be confused by this. After all, it is commonly said that Farewell My Turnabout is Phoenix's own Turnabout Goodbyes. But I once again find myself disagreeing with the popular opinion on this. Farewell My Turnabout is a case that wants to have its cake and eat it too. It's a case that wants to have the appearance of asking hard questions to the player and to Phoenix, but ultimately it offers a cop-out for each of one of those questions, so Phoenix doesn't need to answer them. In Farewell, Phoenix gets blackmailed and has to defend a client which he later learns is guilty. The blackmail in question involves Maya's kidnapping. However, in the process of defending his client, Malengard, he almost convicts an innocent person of murder. This creates a hard choice for Phoenix, one that could have him potentially grow a lot as a character. He has to choose between saving the life of someone very close to him, at the cost of letting a guilty man walk free, convicting an innocent person in the process, or rightfully accuse the guilty man of murder at the cost of Maya's life. Either an innocent party going to jail, or Maya being murdered. Instead, the game conveniently gives him a secret third option, the one that makes him not have to learn anything, because the game pulls off a Deus Ex Machina in the form of the videotape that Engar recorded to try to blackmail the assassin he hired, who is holding Maya hostage, Shelly the Killer. And it also just so happens that Shelly the Killer has a very convenient moral code, where if a client were to betray him, they will become his next target of assassination, making it so Engar pleads guilty to avoid certain doom, saving both the innocent bystander as well as Maya. This frustrates me a lot as a fan, because I feel like it would just take a little bit more of self-awareness to make this story into something great. Something that actually has something interesting, profound, and real to say. A more honest Farewell might have ended with Phoenix having to make this hard choice, and realizing that a lawyer's duty isn't actually to trust their client no matter what, but it's to defend their client even when they're guilty. But of course, these games aren't interested in that. Leaning into the soap opera elements isn't bad, but it can be done in a way like this, where the game wants to balance a courtroom drama, politics, and utterly fails at doing that. Now, I know what some of you may be thinking to yourselves right now. Dude, it's an anime lawyer game. This is typical for Ace Attorney. But I just want to note real quick, mainly because this will also be relevant later on. The game chose to post these questions, post these themes. It's therefore responsibility of it to not only resolve these questions, but resolve them in a satisfying manner. I'm not demanding for Ace Attorney to be a real-life courtroom drama. I'm asking Ace Attorney to, within its own conventions, to treat the ideas, questions, and themes it poses with proper care. Justice for All gets D tier. Its score would be 5 out of 10. While it laid the groundwork for some of the best moments in the series, I don't appreciate at all how it pretends to be more than it actually is. It tries to be grander, it tries to be daring, but it gives the most childish and easy answer to Phoenix possible. I certainly enjoy some aspects of it, but it doesn't remove from the fact that when it came time to tell a story of growth for Phoenix, it cowered. The problem isn't that it has a Deus Ex Machina to solve all the issues. The problem is that it uses the Deus Ex Machina to avoid having to answer the hard questions, and if that weren't enough, at the same time, pretending by the end that it did answer the hard questions. It's intellectually dishonest, to put it simply, which leads us to the original trilogy's magnum opus. I want you to notice something here right at the beginning. In the ending of Trials and Tribulations, the story tension comes initially from Dahlia's attempted revenge, her attempted assassination of Maya Fey. The tension comes from cross-examining Dahlia, and slowly it gets revealed that Maya might have killed her mother, and then decided to jump into the Eagle River to commit suicide. The emotional catharsis of the story comes when it's revealed that Maya couldn't have jumped into the Eagle River, and that she did not kill her mother, because Maya had channeled Dahlia's spirit all along. Then it's revealed that Mia had come up with the plan, and they all give a big speech that makes their soul leave Maya's body. A literal exorcism in court. After that, the case pivots. It becomes about revealing who actually killed Maya's mother, and it's revealed that it was Godot all along, and him and Phoenix share a personal reflective moment together. As you may have noticed, the tension isn't from the courtroom drama anymore. It's not what the lawyer's duty is, or what a prosecutor's duty is. That's all left in the background. And that is why Trials and Tribulations is excellent. Trials and Tribulations is the soap opera, character melodrama climax of the original trilogy, and it successfully managed to put almost all of the courtroom drama elements in the background to focus on what the series actually does best: interpersonal character stories. It's not that it's not a liberal power fantasy anymore, it definitely still is, and it definitely still has the liberal mindset of everything simply being an issue of bad apples. But it puts its character melodrama on the forefront, and it's honest about it. And that is what makes Trials and Tribulations not just great, but my favorite Ace Attorney game. Trials and Tribulations gets an A tier, also 8 out of 10. Unlike the later games, which as we'll see try to balance interpersonal character stories with courtroom drama, and they end up giving horrific messaging because of that, Trials and Tribulations sidesteps the issue of giving horrible messaging by avoiding, wherever possible, to touch the more political, philosophical side of the series. It doesn't subvert its own series in any meaningful way, but instead it doesn't shy away from focusing on what works. Speaking of subversion, in 1945, the Nuremberg trials were held. In them, the Allies judged many Nazi judges for their crimes against humanity. A common defense towards these accusations toward them was that they were following Nazi law, and therefore weren't doing anything wrong by the book. The Nuremberg prosecutors, in response, appealed to a higher sense of law, a natural law, if you will. The Nuremberg trials themselves sparked many debates about the nature of the law to this very day among law philosophers, with the main axiom of the debate being, is law purely a human construct, or is there a higher sense of law? The Nazi judges appealed to the most extreme version of law as a human construct. They argued that if law is a human construct, they can't be held accountable for their actions. They were just upholding the law, doing their job as judges. What they were appealing to was to the idea of positive law. Apollo Justice! Apollo Justice is the fourth game in the Ace Attorney series, and potentially its most controversial one. However, how many fans of the series have actually tried to look into what Apollo Justice is trying to say? From the very beginning of the story, the game reveals that it's not your typical Ace Attorney game. It's trying to ask questions that the series hasn't asked itself before about jurisprudence. Apollo Justice is in essence giving the Ace Attorney formula a different form. It's putting the character melodrama in the background so the courtroom drama can be, maybe not at the forefront, but is willing to ask and answer more difficult questions than previous games have. The game starts immediately by having Apollo convict his own boss of murder, and it's revealed later that the key piece of evidence utilized to do so was fabricated by the now disbarred 7 years ago Phoenix Wright. This is interesting. It's essentially asking, if there isn't a way to convict someone through legal means, is it morally correct to forge evidence in order to justly convict them? The original trilogy's answer to this question would have been a resounding no, but Apollo Justice says, maybe. It's already, from the start, Asking questions about working within the system rules may not be enough. This ultimately culminates in the last case in the game, Turnabout Succession, where Phoenix assembles the first trial with the jury system, since there is no other way to bring Kristoff to justice, and it leads to this moment. This is thematically super rich. Essentially, what we have here is an inversion of the Nuremberg trial. The accused, Kristoff, is the believer in natural law, and the judge, quite correctly might I add, says that the law is the fruit of human knowledge. It's always changing. That's to say, it's socially constructive. It's made by humans. It's important to note here that Kristoff's outburst isn't one of a cynical positivist. When he says the law is absolute, he's not rejecting natural law and appealing to the objective written laws. His outburst is directed at the idea that the law changed and that to him, as a believer in natural law, is inconceivable, because to him, the law is absolute. In essence, the natural law that Kristoff holds, and that the game ultimately critiques, is not a moral code as it is typically understood, but an absolutist perversion. When Kristoff says the law is absolute, he is not talking about the law in paper. He is talking about the higher law that in his absolutism is sacred, cannot be questioned, and that the jury system is breaking. What I also find interesting is that this line by the judges gives an even better, more convincing argument for why the Nazi judges in Nuremberg were wrong. If humans make law, it's a tool, it has a purpose, and the Nazi judges were conscious of that, yet still participating in utilizing this tool. They are just as responsible. I also wanted to mention, for the record, that this isn't just a historical debate from the 1940s. This is a legal, philosophical question that is still very much alive today. To look at one example of this, I decided to highlight Article 72 of the Constitution of the country I live in, Uruguay, to show this point. Artículo 72. La enumeración de derechos, deberes y garantías hecha por la Constitución no excluye los otros que son inherentes a la personalidad humana o se derivan de la forma republicana de gobierno. What this article here in the Constitution does is adhere to natural law, essentially codifying natural law into positive law, and saying that any right, duty, or guarantee that isn't made in the Constitution but is part of natural law still forms a part of the Constitution, even if not directly written about. Where Apollo Justice ending falls short of excellence is in one of the questions the game doesn't ask itself. The judge says that nurturing the laws are our task as human beings, but here's the question that the game brilliantly sets up, yet refuses to utter. If the law is a tool we built, who has been wielding it? And who does it truly serve? For 7 years, The answer was Christoph Gavin, a man who uses contradictions as his personal weapon. The game's hopeful answer is the Judas system, a reformist fantasy that changes the hands on the tool. But it never dares to ask if the problem is deeper than whose hands are on the handle. Christoph's infamous echoing laugh after the verdict is the sound of that unasked question. It's the sound of the absolutist scornfully watching the reformist fantasy play out, knowing that his defeat came not from purifying the law, but from staging a better performance for the new jury. However, as interesting as all of that is, the answer to the previous question, the one Apollo Justice couldn't dare ask, is power. The game ends on a note of hope for the jury system, that maybe this reform will make the world more just. But that is ultimately where Apollo Justice falls into the liberal power fantasy. It's a liberal reformist fantasy. The main critique I have of Apollo Justice is that while it's very daring for the standards of this series, the answer it provides to the question it proposes is the same answer that many reformist governments propose nowadays. Apollo Justice thinks it's daring for proposing the liberal reformist fantasy, but in the real world, the liberal reformist fantasy looks a lot more like the Article 72 I showed earlier. It looks like a clause on a piece of paper, the polishing of the chains, not the removal of them. However, because Apollo Justice is willing to make such questions and answer them, even if flawed, I still appreciate it. It's the most introspective the series got up to this point and for the foreseeable future. I put Apollo Justice in B tier. It's a solid 7 out of 10. It's not perfect by any means, but it's daring, and the daring spirit is something they quite appreciate about it, especially because of how subsequent entries regressed in law of what Apollo Justice did. It's not truly subversive like I mentioned earlier, but it is the most daring the series was up to this point. And now that I mentioned that, that should set the tone for the rest of this video.
Time to bring it to an end.
If Apollo Justice is the mature, older brother of the second trilogy, then Dual Destinies is his younger sibling, who admires his older brother and strives to be like him, but does so poorly. Dual Destinies, in some ways, tries to be more serious, like Apollo Justice, but doesn't get what made Apollo Justice special. What I notice a lot with this game is an ideological retreat from Apollo Justice, and all that's left is some minor interesting elements, but a lot of elements seem to have been taken back to how they were in the original trilogy, although this is also done poorly. The game seems to have this obsession with the Dark Age of the Law, but this Dark Age of the Law is once again caused by bad actors, not by systemic problems, not because the system is designed this way or any inevitability. A prime example of this is shown with Aristotle Means, another mustache-twirling villain, in the vein of the first game. This guy's whole ordeal is that he is a professor at the law university and he teaches students that the ends justify the means. It's actually kind of insulting how the question of forging evidence of Apollo Justice was satirized to this degree. It was a compelling question. Its answer was, maybe. Dual Destinies seems to be more interested in regressing to the original trilogy. Its answer is, no. Aristotle Means also serves as a means to personify the Dark Age of the Law. The issues are happening because of bad actors like Aristotle Means. Then there's other things like the Phantom, who once again is a simplistic mastermind behind a huge plot. One thing you might notice as we move forward with Dual Destinies and the next game is their attempts to give really simple answers to really complex questions. What is the Dark Age of the Law caused by? A bad actor. I put Dual Destinies in E tier, or a 4 out of 10. It's so far the worst one. It's a simple imitation without understanding the form. And as we'll see with the next game, that isn't the worst ever got. If Dual Destiny is a mediocre 4-course meal, where every part tastes bland and it leaves you hungry and disappointed by the end, Spirit of Justice is a 4-course meal where every part tastes excellent, but is full of lead. Spirit of Justice is a really frustrating entry to me. It's a game that is very deeply unaware of its political implications and uses its character melodrama to make you swallow an actively poisonous meal. It's not that it's just unaware of its politics, it's that its politics are harmful and spread a dangerous lie. I don't think the developers of Spirit of Justice wanted to deal with such strong themes, but if they're going to make the antagonist of the game a theocratic dictator who has ruled for 23 years, then whether you want to or not, your story is saying something about the nature of that. And maybe, if they didn't want to handle said topics, they shouldn't have included such strong elements. Let's start small and work our way up. The story starts Phoenix in a foreign country called Khura'in. This country is ruled by a monarchy, under Queen Garan, and the whole deal is that to be a monarch you'd have to know how to do spirit channeling. Garan put up a law called the Defense Culpability Act, or DC Act for short, that means that any person defending criminals will be put to death. This is actually commentary on the Japanese 90% conviction rate because it's making fun of how ridiculous it is. So plus 10 for that. Minus 11 million for what comes next though. In this game they introduce you to Dirk Sadmadi, who is Apollo's adopted dad, and a legal revolutionary. That's to say he wants to undo the DC Act. They build a pretty strong connection with him, and then the final case has you defending him. Except, it's revealed that Dirk has been dead for 3 days up to that point. I will fully disclose for this part that when this was revealed for the first time I played this game, I cried. This moment is brilliant use of character melodrama and it's really good. However, they use this moment of sorrow to make you swallow a very dark pill, one that completely undermines the entire game.
Objection! Hold it! Action!
This moment is obscene. I don't think I need to point this out, but it is obscene how cartoonishly evil they make a little 23-year dictator and play it up like it's a superhero moment with the camera work. Dictators don't care if they don't abide by the rules. Do you think the dictatorships of the 70s of Latin America cared that the constitutions of the countries they made coups of explicitly prohibited coups? Do you think that a dictator, when told that they don't abide by the laws of their own country, would be like, "Oh, you got me, no, I'm dissolving in acid"? The worst part about this ending is that it would just take a little bit more of self-awareness, just like Justice for All, to make it excellent. You can have the Royal Guard come into the court and point their weapons at Apollo and crew. Maybe they talk a little, and then suddenly there's an earthquake. Except it's not actually an earthquake. It's the people of Khorine rushing into the court to prevent this extrajudicial murder and overthrow Garan. Because that is what overthrows theocratic power. Solidarity. People working together. Not pointing your finger hard enough. If that were to happen in real life, Garan would laugh and say, "Royal Guard, execute them." Because in 23 years, the Royal Guard will have incentives, will be indoctrinated, would have fear of going out of line. After this happens, Apollo instates Raifa, who can't do spirit channeling yet, as the queen. So this was just a regime change? The problem isn't a literal theocratic regime, guys, it's just a bad monarch. However, this isn't even the worst part. At first glance, it would seem as if the game cowers too much to commit to an actual revolution, but this is actually not quite it. In reality, the game is doing something far more insidious than that. There's something I've been avoiding telling you up to this point, but Dirk, the supposed revolutionary of the Defiant Dragons, was quite literally part of the Khorine royal family. He used to be Amara's husband. The Defiant Dragons aren't actually revolutionaries representing a popular movement. They are a reactionary movement. As much as the game and the developers might deny it, the game uses the aesthetics of revolution to, on the surface, present what would be a popular movement versus a theocracy, when in reality what it actually is a civil war between competing royal family bloodlines for the throne. And the game has the audacity to call this a revolution? To call the last episode Turnabout Revolution? I realize someone might offer a rebuttal to this and say that actually, the Defiant Dragons were revolutionary because they wanted to undo the Defense Culpability Act. This is, once again, complete and utter nonsense. At most, you can say this is reformist, but not revolutionary. It's still co-opting the aesthetics of revolution for Dirk, who as a reminder, was definitely aware that Raifa is her daughter, and while it's not directly stated that he wants to instate her in the throne, it's pretty clear that's what he wants. Also, just so we're safe, I just want to remind you all that, again, I'm not expecting Ace Attorney to be political science. I'm expecting it to treat the themes, ideas, and things it establishes, especially when they are as serious as these, with proper care and respect within the conventions of the Ace Attorney genre. I don't dislike this game because it's an unrealistic piece of courtroom drama. Trials and Tribulations is my favorite game in the series as a reminder. I also want to caution you against the idea that just because an artist didn't intend a specific reading of a piece of work, it is therefore invalid. I'm aware that to some of you my criticism of this game might seem ridiculous. After all, there's no way that the authors intended this messaging, or the reading that they did of all the previous games for that matter. However, what matters about art isn't what the artist is trying to say, although it is a part of it, But actually, the conversation it starts, what people gather from it. Think about it this way. If an author dies and could in all of their life give a single word on the meaning of their most famous piece, is the meaning of the piece lost forever, or is meaning constructed by us, the viewers of said art? Anyway, now that we're done, this is the liberal power fantasy taken to its absolute absurdist extreme. This game dared to ask the same question as Apollo Justice, who does the law serve? And it answered, the wrong royal bloodline. Let's give the tool back to the rightful one. And for that, I cannot give it anything else other than F tier, or a 2 out of 10. As a closing argument, this isn't a series that stumbled into politics. From the moment it made a corrupt prosecutor its first rival and a blackmailing tycoon its first villain, it was making political choices. It chose to answer systemic problems with individual heroes. Apollo Justice dared to question that choice, to look the tool of the law in the eye. And later games? They choose to look away, polishing the fantasy until it became poison. That's not an accident. I said earlier in this video that Ace Attorney is my guilty pleasure. I'm afraid I wasn't entirely honest with you all. I don't think all of this video, this analysis, could come from a place of guilty pleasure. No. This analysis could only come from a profound, clear-eyed love for this series. This is what that is. I hope, if you're an Ace Attorney fan, like me, you can understand that we don't have to necessarily have to view eye to eye on this. When I critique a game like Spore or a series like Ace Attorney, it isn't because I hate them, it's because I see potential in them to be something far greater than the sum of their parts. That is what I would like to end this video on, and that is what I hope the future of this series has to offer. Peace.